It is now my distinct pleasure to invite the Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Gutierrez, to address the Permanent Forum.
Madam Chair, distinguished members of the Forum, dear friends. Welcome to this 24th Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and thank you for bringing the voices, insights, aspirations, and concerns of Indigenous peoples to this global stage. The world's Indigenous peoples are magnificently diverse in cultures, languages, histories, and traditions. But they are united by common features and common challenges. You are the preeminent stewards of the world biodiversity and of the environment. Your knowledge and traditional practices are leading models of conservation and sustainable use, reflecting your commitment to living life in harmony with Mother Earth and to the well-being and rights of future generations. The world has much to learn from your wisdom, insights, and approaches which prioritize the health of ecosystems over short-term economic gains. As we tackle the many challenges that we face, building sustainable food systems, moving to sustainable ways of living, and more, we must recognize that the world does not always value you as it should. And so, dear friends, the difficulties facing Indigenous peoples around the world are an affront to dignity and justice, and a source of deep sorrow for me personally. Indigenous women face particular challenges, including barriers to political participation, economic opportunities, and essential services. On a trip to Suriname 3 years ago, I had the honor of visiting Kalinga peoples. I witnessed how climate change is devastating their lands and destroying their way of life. And I heard how mercury from illegal mining is harming Indigenous peoples in the region, as in many others, namely including Brazil, poisoning their water and food supplies. Tragically, this is a story replicated around the world. Everywhere, Indigenous peoples are on the front line of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss, despite having done nothing to create this crisis and everything to try to stop them. Eviction and illegal exploitation continue to harm your people and grossly violate your rights. You face marginalization, discrimination, unemployment, economic disadvantage, and horrendous violence, particularly as you seek to defend our common home. And too often, you are excluded from decisions that directly impact your land and territories, threatening your ways of life and food security. Meanwhile, a looming threat grows: the race for minerals critical to the global energy transition, a large proportion of which are located or are close to Indigenous peoples' territories. As demand soars, too often we see dispossession, exclusion, and marginalization in decision-making. The rights of Indigenous peoples trampled and else jeopardized, all as you are denied the benefits you deserve. So, distinguished members of the Forum and dear friends, we know how to right these wrongs. 18 years ago, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples laid out a blueprint for securing the survival, dignity, and well-being of Indigenous peoples everywhere. The Declaration has been used by courts, parliaments, and communities to secure rights and galvanize political action. And multilateralism has delivered progress. In the past year, countries have made important new commitments. In the Global Digital Compact, to build digital skills and capacities, including among indigenous peoples. In the Pact for the Futures, calling to recognize, respect, promote, and protect the right of indigenous peoples and their territories, lands, and ecosystems, while safeguarding their traditions, spiritual beliefs, and ancestral knowledge. And to help to do so by ensuring a seat at decision-making tables. And at COP16 on biodiversity, countries committed to create a permanent new subsidiary body, a space for indigenous peoples and others to participate in decision-making on biodiversity. And they agreed on sharing the benefits of digital genetic information with a portion of the new Kali Fund supporting indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples, and particularly the members of this forum, also contributed to the work of the United Nations panel on critical energy transition minerals. The panel's principles and recommendations are grounded in human rights, including the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Yet, we know that there is much further to go. And I hear your calls for greater and more meaningful participation in the United Nations. The focus of this year's session is implementing the declaration within member states and within the United Nations system. And this is an urgent call to action. And I would point to 4 specific areas. First, strengthening the permanent forum. We need member states to ensure high-level representation. And we need to fortify the trust fund on the indigenous issues, broadening the donor base and increasing contributions. This is vital to enabling the forum to deliver its work, including through participation and representation at international meetings. Second, I urge governments and institutions to ensure that the leadership, rights and needs of indigenous peoples are recognized and acted upon across the board. In a world in flux, it is particularly important that governments are alert to the impacts on indigenous peoples, and governments must honor their obligations in the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples without delay, and bring indigenous peoples, particularly women, into all forms of decision-making, supporting political participation. Third, international finance providers should make indigenous peoples a key consideration, so that finance flows to their self-determined priorities and projects are included in their action. And fourth, I urge countries, companies, and more to work with us to deliver on all the recommendations of the panel on critical energy transition minerals. We'll soon launch the high-level expert advisory group to accelerate action on benefit sharing, value addition, and fair trade, and to make sure that the needs and the input of indigenous communities will be key. Let's be clear. The clean energy era must power progress on indigenous people's rights. And so, distinguished members of the forum, upholding the dignity and worth of every person is central to the work and mission of the United Nations. It is our essence. And because it is at our core, we say loudly and clearly, the individual and collective rights of indigenous peoples are non-negotiable. Now and forever, we stand with you all. Now and forever, we stand with you all in making those rights a reality for indigenous peoples everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank the Secretary General for his statement and for his presence here with us this morning. Ko yan namin